Hi, in this set of problems we're going to be taking a look at solving rectangle perimeter problems. Now, as the name implies, we're going to be looking at rectangles. So let's draw a rectangle. Not bad for a freehand rectangle. And we know that a rectangle is made up of two parts. You've got your length and your width. Now, if we're going to label this as L for length, this also has the same dimension, so that's also L. And if this dimension here is W for width, then this is also W here. And one thing I want to remind you before we get started on this problem, these types of problems, is that the perimeter, we'll call it P for perimeter, is equal to the sum of all the sides. So W plus L plus W plus L. Well, that's two L's, or two lengths, plus two widths. And we're going to use this equation as we solve these types of problems. So let's look at a typical problem. Given that the length of a rectangle is 6 more inches than the width, and that the perimeter is 24 inches, find the dimensions of the rectangle. All right, well, let's look at what's important here. I know that the length of a rectangle is 6 more inches than the width. That's important. And I know that the perimeter is 24 inches. So let's make a sketch. In these problems, you always want to draw the picture. As often as you can, draw the picture, because it's going to help you understand and process what you need to know. Well, what I know is I've got a width, and that the length is equal to the width plus 6 inches, because the length is 6 more inches than the width. So here's my width, and the length is equal to W plus 6, or the width plus 6 more inches. Now remember the equation from the previous page? Perimeter is equal to 2 lengths plus 2 widths. Okay, well, they also told me that the perimeter is 24, so I'm going to take out P. I'm going to put in 24 because I know that the perimeter is 24 inches. So I take out the P and I put in 24, and then it's 2 times the length. But I'll tell you what, look, I know that the length is equal to W plus 6. So I'm going to take out L and put in W plus 6. And then it's plus 2W. That just came straight down. Now if you look at this equation, it's nice because we only have one variable. That's W. So we can use the tools you already know to solve for W. And we will start by distributing the 2. So 24 is equal to 2W plus 2 times 6 is 12 plus 2W. Now I've got 2W and another 2W, so I'm going to add those two together. 24 is equal to 4W plus 12. Now this looks very similar to problems you were doing earlier. We're going to subtract 12 from both sides. Now this W cancels with that W because that's a positive 12. I'm sorry. That 12 cancels with that 12 because here we've got a positive 12 and a negative 12. So those cancel. 24 minus 12 is 12 equals 4W. 4W means 4 times W, so to get rid of the 4, we'll divide by 4. Division is the opposite of the multiplication. We're going to do it on both sides. 4 in the numerator cancels with 4 in the denominator, and I'm left with W equals 12 divided by 4 is 3. So now I know what the width is. The width is equal to 3, and the length, which is equal to W plus 6, is equal to 3 plus 6, which is equal to 9. So there's my width, and there's my length. Let's just check it. Let's take that, W equals 3, and put it up here. So this side is 3, this side is 3, and I think my length is 9, so I'll put 9 here and 9 here, and let's just add those up. 3 plus 9 is 12. 12 plus 3 is 15, and 15 plus 9 is 24. So that's a check. So the dimensions are equals 3 inches, and length equals 9 inches. And that's how you do a fairly typical problem with rectangular area. There's your answer. Okay, in this type of problem, we're going to look at consecutive integer problems. Now, before we jump into this one, let's talk about what this means. What are consecutive integers? Well, I want you to think of 3 or 4 numbers that are in a row. Let's look at 4, 5, 6, and 7. And you can see that these are consecutive numbers. 4, then 5, then 6, then 7. Okay? Now, when we do these problems in the homework tonight, you're not going to know what the numbers are ahead of time. So you're going to have to label them. So in this case, what I'm going to do is label 4 as n. Okay? Now, I don't want to introduce a new variable, so I want to describe 5 in terms of n. If I think about it, that's n plus 1. If n is equal to 4, then 4 plus 1 is 5. N plus 2 would be 6, because remember, n is equal to 4, so I have 4 plus 2 is equal to 6. Now, just in your head, I want you to think about how can we express 7 in terms of n? Did you get n plus 3? All right. So these are consecutive numbers, but if we don't know ahead of time what they are, we can express them like this: n, n plus 1, n plus 2, n plus 3, and that always works. Let's look at some different numbers. Let's look at negative 11, negative 10, and negative 9. Now, does it look like I wrote these backwards? If you think about it, negative 11 is smaller than negative 9, so I still started with the smallest one, and I got bigger. Well, does it still work if I call negative 11 n? What would n plus 1 be? What is negative 11 plus 1? Yeah, it's negative 10. And what would n plus 2 be? Again, negative 11 plus 2 is negative 9. So I'm going to use this kind of logic as we go in to solve some problems like this. Let's look at a problem. The sum of 3 consecutive integers is 147. Find the integers. Well, you can see in this, I'm not given what the numbers are, but I can go back to this logic, and I can identify the numbers with variables like that. So let's do that. Here's the first number, I'll call it n. Here's the second number, n plus 1, and here's the third number, n plus 2. And I know that if I add these 3, because it said the sum of 3 consecutive integers, I know that the sum is equal to 147. Now, how do we solve something like this? Well, we've got everything in addition. I've got n plus n, and I've got another plus n. So how many n's is that? Well, that's 3 n's. And then I've got a plus 1 and a plus 2. And if you add those together, that's plus 3 equals 147. Now, doesn't this look like a problem you've done already? Well, take 3 away from both sides. 3n plus 3 minus 3. The plus 3 minus 3 cancels. So I'll bring down the 3n equals 147 minus 3 is 144. Now I've got 3 times n, so I'll divide both sides by 3. Divide both sides by 3. The 3's cancel. I'm left with n. N is equal to. Now 3 goes into 14 4 times. Carry the 2, because 3 times 4 is 12. 12 from 14 is 2. I'll put a 2 there just to remind me. 3 goes into 24 8 times. Well, look, I've got my first number. So n equals 48. N plus 1 is equal to 48 plus 1, which is 49. And n plus 2, Sorry about that. There we go. N equals 48. N plus 1 equals 48 plus 1 equals 49. And then N plus 2 equals 48 plus 2 equals 50. So my three numbers are 48, 49, and 50. And it's easy to check this because if you add these up, you should get 147. There's your answer. All right, here's another look at consecutive integer problems. This time it's a little different because we're going to talk about consecutive even or odd integers. So let's think of 2 or 3 consecutive even numbers. Let's go with 4, 6, and 8. All right. Now notice that these are consecutive, but they're not one after another. They're even numbers. So 4, and then the next even number is 6, and then the next even number is 8. Now, if you remember in the last problem, what we looked at is calling the lowest number n. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say 4 is equal to n. How would I express 6 in terms of n? Well, it would be n plus 2. Because if n is equal to 4, 4 plus 2 is 6. Now, the 8 would be n plus, what would I put right here? Did you say 4? That's right. Well, if n is equal to 4, then 4 plus 4 is 8. Now let's see if it's different for odd numbers. Let's go 3, 5, and 7. Okay, now do you think it's going to be any different this time? Let's call the 3 equal to n. Now how would I express 5 in terms of n? Well, that would be n plus 2. Because if n is equal to 3, then 3 plus 2 is 5. And the 7 would be n plus 4, because n is equal to 3, and 3 plus 4 is 7. But I want you to notice something, that whether it's even integers or it's odd integers, it's n, n plus 2, n plus 4, and so on, or odd, n, n plus 2, n plus 4, and so on. It's the same thing. So let's look at an example. The sum of 2 consecutive odd integers is 56. Find the numbers. Okay, this time we're looking not for consecutive numbers, but consecutive odd integers, okay? Well, again, let the lowest number be n, and the next one up would be n plus 2, okay? Now, since we are talking about sum, I'm going to add these, and I know that the sum is equal to 56. I've got n plus n, so n plus n is equal to 2n, plus 2 equals 56. Let's subtract 2 from both sides. 2n plus 2 minus 2, those cancel, and I bring down the 2n, is equal to 54. Now 2 times n, so I divide by 2. 2's cancel. I'm left with n. I've got to remember to divide by 2 on both sides. So n equals 54 divided by 2 is 27. Notice I got an odd integer. So n equals 27, and n plus 2 is equal to 27 plus 2, which is equal to 29. So my two integers are 27 and 29. There's my answer. These problems, when you're talking about odd or even integer, consecutive odd or even integers, the difference between this and just regular consecutive numbers is that instead of n, n plus 1, n plus 2, n plus 3, it's n, n plus 2, n plus 4, and that's whether it's even or odd. So keep that in mind, and there's your example problem.